At this time, I would ask everyone to either silence or turn off their cell phones so as not to disrupt today's meeting. We'd appreciate it. The procedure will be to introduce the case record as the Codes Department has it on the wall here by means of a PowerPoint presentation. We'll present any maps, photographs, plans, site plans of today's cases, as well as any letters that we've received in support or opposition to a case, as well as any correspondences that we've received from other metro agencies. At the conclusion of our presentation, the applicant will come first to present their case to the board along with any persons in support. If there's opposition to a case, the board will hear from those parties opposed. After the opposition has presented their testimony, the applicant will have a period for rebuttal. The board and their rules provide applicants in cases without opposition 10 minutes to present their testimony. This is where you'll come to testify before the board. To your right, just on the ledge there, is the clock with your time. That clock runs upon your testimony to the board. It does stop for any questions asked of you by the board, and your responses to those questions are not timed. At the conclusion of the applicant's case, the opposition will come forward and present their testimony. And then again, as I said, the applicant can have a period for rebuttal. The applicant, you need to save some of your time on that clock if you wish to have a rebuttal period. All section numbers that are referred to today come directly from the Metropolitan Code of Law in Title 17. Title 17 was adopted by the Metro Council on January the 1st, 1998, and applies to the entire jurisdiction of Metro government. I'll introduce and make a copy, make a part of the record, the zoning code, a copy of which is at my desk, and I'll dispense from reading individual sections unless the applicant or opposition requests that I read those sections. The code requires that these proceedings be taped. Therefore, anyone wishing to address this board, please come forward. I have 4 seats there. I have 3 seats, but I will have a 4th chair here in just a minute. So 4 folks can come up at any one time. On your microphone stand, looks just like mine here. 2 buttons. If you'll hit the right button, it says speak. The red light will come on at your mic, and then identify yourself. When you get done, if you'll please turn that off, and then we'll hear from the next person. We'll go through all cases set for public hearing today, and after each case, the board will then vote or discuss and then vote on the case. The board's vested to act before us on the cases today under 1740-180 of the Metro Code of Law. The code requires that 4 members of a 7-member board to be present to constitute a quorum. Today, I have 5. I am expecting 6 members to be here before the day is up. In the event that only 4 members participate in your case and you fail to get all 4 votes, your case is automatically deemed tied, and your case will be reset and re-advertised for the next available public hearing, which will be July the 18th, is what we're currently taking cases for. If you have 5 or more members present and heard your case and you fail to get 4 affirmative votes, your case will stay on our agenda for the next 30 days. In that instance, we'll only have 1 meeting in the next 30 days. And if none of those members change their vote to get you to 4 affirmative votes, or the members who did not participate haven't come in and reviewed the record and become eligible to participate, your case is deemed denied by operation of law. The applicant or any aggrieved property owner may request a rehearing of this board within 60 days of today's public hearing. Further, any applicant or aggrieved property owner may appeal this board's decision to Chancery or Circuit Court within the same 60-day period, but after 60 days has elapsed, this board's decision is final and no further action can be taken. If you're an applicant and your case is granted, you have 2 years from today's date to pick up the permit for which you've applied, and for this board's approval to remain active. If you don't come and get your permit, today's approval is null and void, and you must start over after 2 years. So, Mr. Chairman, I submit that all cases were filed in proper order. The applicants were notified by certified mail as required by the zoning code, and a legal ad was published in the Tennessean. I do have one preliminary announcement before we get into it today. At the top of page 2, case 2013-53, Ms. Melanie Morgan in the St. James Baptist Church, the owner of the property over on 28th Avenue North. The case has been withdrawn by the applicant prior to the hearing. This is the second withdrawal within a 6-month period, and that case is withdrawn with prejudice, so no further cases can be filed on that property for 6 months for the same relief that she sought. Now, if there's something else they need to do, they can file. That's the only preliminary announcement I have today. And before we get into our consent agenda, the board does allow elected officials to address the board. Before we begin, and I do say, Council Lady, do you want to address the board now, or you want to wait for your case? Or?
It's the first case, so I'll just
Okay.
wait if you don't
All right.
mind.
Any other elected officials present who wish to address the board? Okay. Seeing none, the board does have a consent agenda. Prior to today's agenda, a board member reviews the record in each case, and if they feel, in their opinion, the applicant meets the criteria for the application they've requested, and they feel that testimony in a case would not alter the material facts, they recommend the case to the remainder of the board for approval. I'll now enter into the record those cases that have been recommended for approval by the chair, Mr. Whitson. And if you're here in opposition to any of these case numbers that I call, please raise your hand, and we'll hear the case in its regular order. We have two items on the consent agenda today, both of which are on page 2. Case 2013-54, Mr. Will White's the appellant, Dean White, the owner at 3706 Murphy Road, requesting a variance in the street setback in RS 7.5 to construct a new 2,300 square foot building. Is there anyone here in opposition to case 54? Any opposition present to case 54? Mr. Chairman, seeing none, this is a case that a home actually is being reconstructed on the same foundation as the existing home that sits in line with the adjoining homes on either side. So they sought the variance in this case. And then the second case recommended for consent, case 2013-55, Mr. Steve Durden and Jeffrey and Julianne Infante, the owners at 3617 Hampton Avenue, who are requesting a variance in the height requirements to construct a detached garage and covered carport. Is there anyone here in opposition to case 55 on Hampton Avenue? Mr. Chairman, seeing none. This case, the topography in the case necessitates a need for a variance in that case. So Mr. Whitson recommends cases 54 and 55 to the board.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Got a motion, got a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes.
If you're the applicant in cases 54 or 55, cases have been approved, you are free to go. You are also free to stay and hang out with the rest of us. And we'll get started. The first case on today's agenda that we'll hear is case 2013-52, Mr. Billy Gann on Ben Allen Road. And Mr. Gann, if you guys want to come forward, and Council Lady, you're welcome to join them at the table if you'd like to as well. I'll go through some photographs and explain to the board why we've denied the permit, and then I'll turn it over to you guys. Is there anyone here in opposition to case 52? 52, none seen. Gentlemen, you'll have 10 minutes to present. Let me go through the photographs first, but before I do, a lot of folks forget history. Mr. Ewing, today is the 69th anniversary of the D-Day landings in Normandy, which I'm proud to say my uncle was a part of. My mother's brother, he's long since passed us, was one of these men that you see, not in this particular photograph, but one of the gentlemen that landed in France. So I do want to recognize those few men that are still remaining with us on this day. So.
Thank you, Joey. It was a big day for our country and a big day for the world, and it's nice to know that members of your family also served, and thank you for everyone else's service to our military now and then, of course.
All right. The subject property for case 52 is located on the north margin of Ben Allen Road, just north of Hart Lane. It is in the RS 15 zone district, and it is the property that you see here surrounded in red. The nature of the request is the gentleman has erected a ham radio tower, or an amateur radio tower as the zoning code defines it as. This is really probably for maybe all of the members sitting here the first time we've heard a case on a radio tower. So I'm going to, for everyone's education, let me read just over the zoning code and what that deals with. You can see the tower actually in this aerial photograph dated in 2010 at the rear of the site here. The zoning code, these are accessory uses in a residential zone district under the communication section. 1716-290, it says, letter A, amateur radio antenna. In all residential districts, transmission and reception antennae are may be attached to a single tower accessory to a residential dwelling, and it subjects that request to three restrictions, of which the gentleman is asking for variances in two of those. Actually, all three of those. Let me switch over to, this is the site plan submitted to us by the applicant. Let's go over those. The first one says that antenna may be mounted on a single tower or pole or attached to the dwelling or accessory structure, provided that only one such support or attachment shall be permitted per lot, and that guy wires shall not extend beyond the property boundaries. That is the one I've listed actually at the bottom of this page. The guy wire for one of these towers does cross the property line. The zoning code, the gentleman before you actually owns that property adjoining, but the code does not differentiate ownership on that. So it says it cannot go over the property line. Secondly, which is the top listed, the maximum height of an antenna shall be 60 feet as measured from the finished grade at the base of the support structure. And it's our indication is that this is 160 feet in height. And third, the tower support shall be located to the rear of the dwelling, which this is, and shall be set back from all property lines a distance equal to 1/2 of the overall height of the tower of the entire structure. So the setbacks in which you see listed at a 160-foot tower requires an 80-foot setback, and the base of the tower there, 55 from rear, and actually 28 from the side yard. I have 23, but I'll correct that. It's 28 feet to the base. This is looking at the subject property upon my visit out there. You also notice on an adjoining property, I believe there's a cellular phone tower located there, perhaps even a tower for emergency medical personnel, and then a third tower on the adjoining site there. In this photograph where my cursor is, the sort of the white area which you'll see there, and you'll notice in the aerial photograph, water tower, which is to the northeast of the site.
Where are the other towers on what piece of property?
They are located on the aerial photograph you'll see right in here. So just slightly north and east of this subject property. Mr. Gann does own, I believe, and if that's the case, own both of these parcels here. This is the subject parcel that's before you today. The guy wire for this tower does extend over and necessitates the need for variance over onto this adjoining property.
Do you know what was the zoning of the other property for the tower?
The tower with the other property, what was the zoning for that?
It's RS-15 as well.
Okay.
And that would be this parcel here. And then views of the adjoining properties there. At the base of the tower, I believe there's an accessory building located there, and then the subject tower, which you see here, and then adjoining towers on adjacent properties. I'll let the applicant cover sort of how we got here today. It appears, at least from aerial photographs, this tower has been out here for some time. I don't have exact dates looking. I'll let you guys fill that in on there, but it appears it came to our notice by a complaint, and our field personnel went out and inspected and found, yes, indeed, there's a tower out here, and it violates these conditions. So he has filed this appeal and is before you seeking relief on those three items under 1716-290A. With that, I'll turn it over.
Joey, can I ask one question first?
Sure.
We have one letter in opposition, which is 509, and so I'm thinking that's the property immediately to the right.
I can get that address.
I mean, the subject property is 507.
Yes.
I think it's to the right, must be, because I think the applicant owns to the left. Okay. I was just wondering, okay. You can go ahead. Or
Okay.
Council Lady can go ahead, either one. Would you like to speak, Council Lady, first? Or?
Well, that would be fine. I just want to thank you all for your time and your service and consideration on this issue. My name is Karen Bennett. I'm the councilwoman for District 8, and this is in my district. I wanted to let you know I have not received any complaints from constituents concerning Mr. Gann's property and the tower itself. It's been there as long as I can remember, or one just like it, and I'll let him expound upon that. But we really have had no complaints. This is an extremely high point. As you can see, there are several towers in the area. I think the community is fairly used to the existence of the towers, so I don't think where it's located affects other residential views of the downtown area, though it does have spectacular views up there. And that's really all I can add. If you have any questions for me, I'd be glad to try to answer them. Thank you.
You ready for me? My name's Billy Gann. I own them two pieces of property. In 1987, when I bought 505, I got a permit to put up a 160-foot ham radio tower, and the board approved it, the setback and everything. And the tower was getting a little low, and I wanted to remove it and put up a better tower. And it's not, and I, meanwhile, bought 507. And it's 70 feet from where the other tower was, and that's why I didn't get a permit. I thought, well, I own most piece of property. It's not that far from the old tower. So I erected the tower. And the opposition to this, which my attorney's got a letter here, he'd be happy to show you, because I won't kick my little tenant, I know it sounds crazy, out of my rental house and let him rent it to somebody he knows, he has caused me all the trouble he can try to cause. In fact, he put a letter in my mailbox to that effect. And I'd appreciate it very much if you let me keep the tower.
May it please the board, I'm Tom Kittrell, and I'm a lawyer. I'm helping Mr. Gann obtain this variance. This tower, what he's talking about with regard to the neighbor, and I guess that's the 509 neighbor, there was some dispute about whether Mr. Gann ought to rent to this neighbor's friend or not. I wrote a letter to the neighbor and told the neighbor that Mr. Gann had another tenant he thought would be better, and that it was up to Mr. Gann really who he should rent to. The person that the neighbor wanted him to rent to, I think, was a known drug user, for one thing. So we wrote this letter, and now all kinds of trouble has occurred. So that's what happens when you write a letter sometimes. That's how this started. This tower's been there for 12 years, or a tower just exactly like it. The tower that was there before was 160 feet tall, and that's what this one is. Mr. Gann uses this for a ham radio. That's what he does with it. Nobody's ever complained before this. I think he's a very good citizen and a good member of the community, as evidenced by Council Lady's statements up here. These are metro towers beside his tower. They're really bigger than his tower. So he's got one little third tower here that sits beside two big metro towers when you look at the scene from a distance. He's really just asking to be allowed to continue what he's done all these years, and I think he's got a good case here. There's been nobody else ever come forward to object to this. He keeps these up. This new tower, he spent a lot of money erecting this brand new tower. We have a letter here from the engineering company that talks about how well it's erected, how good the guy wires are put in. I believe, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but the guy wire that went over onto the adjoining property is onto his property. So it's not like it's a guy wire that's going to somebody else's property and is in the way. This is really an application to continue what's been going on and what he thought was perfectly acceptable for the last 12 years. So anything you could do to help Mr. Gann, I know he would appreciate it.
Mr. Gann, I have a question for you. For those of us who are not ham radio enthusiasts like yourself, could you kind of explain about the height of these and the need from an engineering standpoint to have these longer guide wires? I'm actually a little surprised that, technology hasn't kind of made these smaller, or with the internet, there's still people that like to do ham radio.
This tower, can you hear me okay? This tower is designed for a 160-foot freestand. But during 1994, we had an ice storm, and it almost took a tower out that I had. So when I put this one up, I said, I'm going to guide it 4 ways, every 50 foot, because if we have another ice storm, I'm not have to worry about it. In fact, we've had a 100-mile-an-hour wind come through northeast Nashville a couple of years ago. Didn't bother it. It moved every antenna on Metro's tower and didn't move none of mine. And I like to add, if it wasn't for my tower, Metro would have never put no towers up there, because they used to, in the old radio system Metro had, they used to use my radios for the East Station precinct. When theirs went out, they come to me and say, hey, we need some radios.
And I believe your tower was put up before the Metro
My
tower.
towers was put up. Well, when the Metro radio shop seen how well it covered, they done some research, and the smaller Metro tower was actually originally erected at 22nd and Charlotte at the Fire Hall. They took it down and relocated it, and at that time they put records and Vice Squad and some more stuff on it, and it worked so well, they said, hey, when we go to 800, we've got to have a site there.
So-
and they put up the big one.
To kind of collaborate what Council Lady Bennett said, nobody else but this one neighbor has complained or said anything.
Nobody's never complained.
And we just entered the letter that I had written way back, not expecting all this trouble, to this neighbor. You can see pretty much, if you want to take a look at it, what happened. It's pretty routine neighbors controversy, really. I tell you what is important, and Mr. Gann showed me this right before the meeting, is the letter from the engineer. And we might want to go ahead and put that in the record, because I was impressed with it. Apparently, this engineer went out there and went up it twice at least, and just was glowing in his report about how well this tower was constructed.
They do all my antenna work, stuff like that, because I'm too old to climb 160 foot. You know, in fact, I'm scared of heights. About 40 foot's my limit.
In the meantime, can I ask you 3 questions? One, the opposition's letter said that one of the guide wires was on his property. I'm assuming that's just factually inaccurate.
No, sir. In fact, if you look at the photograph, I have measured that thing every which way you could measure it, and it's about 2 foot off his property line.
Okay, and the second question is, I am assuming that the reason you're needing the variance with respect to setbacks is because of the narrowness of the lot, that you
Yes,
just can't, just for safety purposes?
Yes, sir.
And then my third question is, I'm assuming the variance you need for height is because of the quality of the communications coming off the wire? Okay,
It
thank you.
gets it out of the tree line.
Okay,
Once you get up high enough out of the tree line, you get real good coverage.
okay. Thank you very much. Any other questions, or anybody? Adam?
I have a question about one of the photographs that I assume that your opposition sent, showing one of the foundations for one of the guy wires with a level on there.
Sir?
There's a photograph sent in by your opposition.
Okay, we've not seen those, but here I believe we've been handed that. Is that the photograph that shows the round concrete base that appears to be pulling up a little bit?
Right.
Yes, sir. That's 5 feet in the ground. So that's washout around it, and that picture shows it looks a lot worse than what it actually is.
So the drawing that's you submitted that shows the foundation schematics is actually accurate, and that foundation is 6 feet deep by,
Well, the concrete's 5 and the anchor is 6.
okay.
And I know that sounds weird, but I put an auger at the end of the 5 foot and screwed it in the ground before I poured the concrete around it to give it a good foundation. It's been that way probably several years. I check on it quite often to see if it's changed any. And it's just where water runs off that hill and it's washed out around it a little bit.
I guess to clarify my question is there is no concern that foundation is going to fail because of the appearance of the foundation?
No, sir.
There's not, and let me read one sentence in this letter that I just saw when we came to the meeting here from Wireless Plus, and this is Mr. Mark Walker, the president, who apparently installs these kinds of antennas. And at the very last, he said, all guide wires are stable and also in good condition. We are happy to report everything is to specs. And that's after he's talked about, I know you all haven't had a chance to see this because I've just seen it. I think we did move it into evidence here, but it may not have got around to you. I don't know.
So what about the guy wire that is on his, I guess I'm directing this at our attorney. Do we have to worry at all about the guy wire that's on his adjoining property? Are we granted anything that?
The indication from the testimony is that it is not, in fact, on the neighbor's property.
No, I meant there's one guy wire on this drawing. If north is up on this, the 79 foot, it's on his other lot, but they're two separate properties. Is that an issue for us at all?
Maybe
But that's why we're here. That's what Joey said earlier. That even if it's common ownership, it's.
I mean, is there? Yeah, I mean, but we're given a variance for the guy wire also.
You get a
on
bit
the
of a
other property.
bailout on the fact that it's common ownership. It would be a different story if there were different owners coming
Right.
in, or if the applicant were to try to sell the property, the second property as we're referring to it here, then that'd have to be something to address by deed, obviously,
Okay.
in the transfer of ownership. But common ownership kind of bails out the board on this one.
Okay. I just didn't want to approve something we couldn't approve.
To be technical, doesn't it bail out the applicant?
To add to this neighbor that's in opposition to this, I've got a photograph of a camera he's installed on the eave of his house to try to intimidate my renter, shining right in his kitchen window. Why? I don't even know if the camera works or not, but it's just.
Hopefully this will all die a slow death, and we won't have to worry about this. I don't think there's been any trouble lately on it, so.
No, it's just a camera there. I don't care. I told my tenant, I said, don't worry about it. Act like it's not there.
That letter I wrote was last September, so I never heard anything back from him or his attorney or anybody else. So.
Do we have any other questions?
I'd like to ask my attorney one question about one of the allegations in the opposition's letter that the tower is being used as a commercial endeavor. Is there a restriction on what this owner can?
Under the Metro Code at 1716-290, which addresses the communication accessory structures, just talks about the fact that transmission reception antenna may be attached, and it doesn't speak directly as to the commercial nature of the use, the hobbyist nature of the use, or anything else. I don't think it's really going to be relevant, and I think there was no formal testimony put forth or evidence put forth other than kind of a bland assertion from the neighbor on that point.
So we can disregard that comment?
If the board so chooses, I think that's probably one option to you. And as I mentioned, actually didn't mention before, and Mr. Chair, I would note this for your consideration. Staff has suggested, and rightly so, that if the board is to entertain granting this appeal, it would be potentially appropriate to include a condition whereby any change in ownership or anything that's granted here would be conditioned in the appropriate manner with regard to prospective change in ownership on the adjacent lot, to address back to the question that Mr. Harper raised.
Any other questions? If there are no questions, I'd like to close the public hearing and open up to discussion. If there is no discussion, I am going to move that the board approve the variance because all of the requirements of MCL 17.40.370 have been met. The board finds that the unique characteristics of the property, which are the extreme narrowness and the height, and then also the hardship of needing additional height for clarity to clear the trees, gives us grounds to approve the variance. However, that the variance be conditioned upon the fact that if the second lot where the guide wire is attached is ever sold, then the variance will no longer be applicable. As long as the two lots aren't under common ownership, then the variance would no longer be applicable.
I'll second that.
Okay, so we've got a motion, we've got a second. Anybody want to add or tweak or?
I guess I want to add that I can support it based on my assumption that the letter from the engineer states that the foundation is safe and sound. So based on that knowledge, I can support it.
Here, for discussion purposes, my only question is are we basically hamstringing him from ever being able to sell that property and
He
keep
would
this
just have-
tower? He would have to come back for another variance?
No, I think as long as he got an easement.
He'd have to sell both.
Right.
That's what Chris's variance.
Both pieces of property?
Yes. As long as they're under common ownership, they don't have to come back to this board. So he could sell both of these lots to somebody and they could continue to use the tower and not have to deal with us.
Or if he sold the lot on the left, I guess he could get an easement from the.
That's what I'm thinking. You're basically making him come back if he sells one of the pieces, one piece of property. So why don't we give him an easement to run with the land?
But isn't the easement?
Well, yeah, we can't.
I mean,
it would have to be the new owner who granted the easement. I mean, I guess we could modify it that it either has to be under common ownership or he has to have obtained a written easement from the new owner.
Okay. Now that I'm okay. I mean, I think that we can't really keep him from ever selling that other piece of property.
Do we need
Sure,
a
and
friendly
the idea is to
amendment
keep from having to come back just because there's a change in ownership on the second parcel, either common ownership or in the alternative, an easement that addresses the issue. And to the, I think, underlying point that you're driving at, you don't want to force somebody to come back to maintain the variance that's been properly granted here today.
And you want to allow him to be able to have his own property ownership
Sure.
rights.
Sure. And I think the easement is the way around it. And in the event of an easement or common ownership, changing hands of both parcels, those would both be scenarios where this variance could be kept intact if the board were inclined to move that matter.
Okay.
That's not the smoothest motion I've ever made. But Joey, did you?
Sorry, I didn't mean to throw a wrench in it. But
Joey, did you keep up with it?
I do understand what you're saying.
And I'm fine with that.
did you understand what I was trying to accomplish?
Yes, and I appreciate your help on it. What you're
Okay.
trying to do is a favor for us.
Yes.
Keep us coming back. And I
Very much so.
understand that.
Okay.
And that's fine.
Okay, so we've got a motion, we've got a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes. Congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, members of the board.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah.
I kind of like to see somebody out of the hobby. Arizona.
I would have thought with the internet and things that nobody knows.
Okay, our next and final case of today's agenda is case 2013-56. Mr. Ryan Schimmel is the appellant. R.N. Moore Jr. and Earl Beasley Jr., owners of the property at 500 Houston Street, requesting a variance in the number of required parking spaces in the IR zoning district to use a portion of the existing non-residence building for Fort Houston, referred to the board under section 20030. The appellant has alleged the board would have jurisdiction under section 1740-180, item B. The use is actually vocational school. Applicant's present. All right, gentlemen, if you'll come forward to the table at this time. Any parties opposed to case 56? Okay, no parties opposed. Gentlemen, you'll have 10 minutes to present your case after I present our side first, and I'll turn it over to you guys. The subject property is located at the intersection of Houston Street and Brown Street. It is in the IR zone district. It should be noted, as you'll see in the photographs, Brown Street physically does not exist as a public way, but the right-of-way does exist, so it is technically a public street. This property is the portion that's surrounded in red here on the zoning map, and then on the aerial photograph. The nature of the request is to use the space that you see here for the land use classified as vocational school. Vocational school classification by our office, just read that real quick. It's a vocational school means the offering of regularly scheduled instruction in technical, commercial, or trade skills, and that definition also, broadly encompasses workshops and numerous other items that the applicant has discussed with our office that he's requesting to do. Based on the floor area in which he's utilizing, and it requires 39 parking spaces on the site to be provided. The gentleman, as you see in the site plan list here, shows a total of 19 spaces on the property. Our office does give him credit, as the zoning code allows for on-street parking at a 50% rate along Houston Street. But the zoning code does not allow me to count any parking on the Brown Street right-of-way. So credit for 2 of these 4 stalls toward his requirement, 19 on the site. So you'll notice there's a large tree at the front of the property that the gentleman's wishing to retain. This is looking into the subject property from Houston Street. That's the said tree that you noticed in the photographs in the parking area. This is an adjoining tenant, I believe, in this space. His parking would then come along this building, and then another view of the parking area.
So if Brown isn't a street?
Well, it is a street, but it's not. It appears over time it's not a road that the city installed and maintained, and this is it here, what you see. This is Brown Street. But the functionality of it out there, it appears that essentially, the folks that occupy these structures over on the east side and north of this site just generally use it as a parking area. But it is actually a public road.
It is a public road?
Yes. But the zoning code does not allow you to count this west side of a north-south street.
It's not because of the street issue. It's
No,
because
no.
of which side of the street
It's which side of the street is
If
on.
you went over there, you could park there.
Yeah.
You just can't count it.
I just can't count it for the purposes of the zoning code.
Okay, I thought you meant because of the classification
all.
of the street.
No.
It's the capriciousness of the west-east, north-south counting parking issue. That was for the council.
This view in the bottom left is looking east on Houston Street. You see my truck here in the foreground. But this is the area in which 4 cars can stack, and of those 4, I can count 2 toward his on-street requirement. And then the parking area that exists out there today. This change of use and the associated increased parking requirement above the existing use does require him to surface the lot. As you noticed in those photographs, it is a gravel lot out there today. He will have to surface this lot and has agreed to do so.
And Joey, it looks like the bottom left-hand photo looks like there's parking across the street too. Can you park on that side of the street?
Yeah, there are no signs
We
prohibiting.
can't count that.
But I can't count any.
There's available parking. Yeah, we can.
And the parking requirement is based on square footage and use?
Yes, based on that, the parking count runs, he gets inside the urban zoning overlay. We are within 660 feet of a transit road, which would be Chestnut, that cuts through. So there's 10% reduction there, and also a 10% reduction for sidewalks located in that neighborhood. Vocational school requires a 1 space per 200 square foot.
And
parking.
And not to, I know this seems like minutia, but I'm noticing that a lot of the space is gallery space, and the code doesn't take into account.
It really doesn't. We do it on a gross floor area. There are instances for us that we can, in an inventory or retail setting, back out inventory, stock rooms and that part, but there's really no breakout of that gallery space under the zoning code I could attach to it.
But there is but not the storage.
Yeah, the storage area I can back out.
And did you?
Yes, sir, I did. And that's how I come up with the 39 spaces.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. With that, I'll turn it over to you, gentlemen, and if you would please identify yourselves and make your presentation to the board. You'll have 10 minutes to present.
Thank you guys for having us here today. My name is David Grisham. I'm the architect, and I've been doing the drawings, and I've got 2 owners, Daniel and Josh, here with us. And I'll address you guys first, trying to lay out the site plan. As Joey said, we did as much as we could to provide existing parking on the site. However, due to this large, beautiful, healthy American elm tree, we just aren't able, and the site size, we just aren't able to get the spots that we need. However, the classification of vocational school, we feel is not, this business is a fairly new style, and the classification is not the best, most accurate description of what this business is and how it's run. And the demand really is not anywhere close to the demand of a vocational school. Daniel is there on a daily basis, and he can kind of give you guys an idea of what actually is needed.
Yeah, so although we're classified as vocational, it doesn't paint the most accurate portrait of what we are. Essentially, to put it in the easiest terms, we are a gym for creatives. So we offer access to resources such as tools and space via memberships and classes. So essentially, you can pay a monthly membership and get access to a wood shop, our print shop, or just space to do your work. We do offer classes. Those are typically in the evenings after hours for most of the surrounding tenants along Houston or Chestnut. Typical class size is 4 to 8. We have had up to 15 people for a class. It's not common. At any given time, we typically have 20 people at the space tops. That includes members and students, and it kind of changes throughout the day. We have day members as well as hobbyists that come in the evenings after hours from their day jobs. With that said, the on-street parking that is available, as there is no tenant south of us, directly south from us, as the pictures showed, there is that option. Also, our landlord, he owns the entire complex surrounding us. So within walkable distance along Chestnut, just to the north, there are 2 gravel lots, and from our best guess, it typically has 6 to 8 tenants that park there regularly. At times there are more, but given the size of them, it could, and we have had permission from our landlord to use those lots, given that we don't interfere with the current tenant use. We've also had conversations with 516 Hagen, Zeitgeist Gallery. They have given us express permission to use their lot in addition if we had overflow. With that said, we also do an occasional event, usually arts-centered once a month. With the talks of the neighborhood, that'll be a community or neighborhood art crawl. So the parking would then be dispersed amongst the entities that are involved within the crawl. Other than that, I think that's about what I have to say.
Given the nature of the business, too, and the actual use, 20 is really the maximum that this building can support profitably from 20 occupants. So really anything more than that is detrimental to the business. So there would be no reason to have more cars than that.
And are you surfacing the lot, or it can't remain gravel, can it?
Well, we would like to talk with you guys about, we have some concerns regarding the, let me switch to mine. We have some concerns regarding the existing condition. The Brown Street, whatever you want to call it, tends to turn into a little bit of a, right now it gets a pretty heavy stormwater runoff. So we actually are a little bit concerned that the lot's been gravel for decades. And we don't see that there have been any problems. And we think that paving and creating a non-impervious surface would actually detrimentally add to the stormwater load. But that, that's for the city to kind of discuss.
As it's also a shared. It's a shared loading dock between 500 Houston as well as Houston Station, directly east of us. So.
However, that does entail keeping it impervious, but having the whole lot.
Well,
Joey, is that anything we could decide today?
is that part of the appeal?
They'd have to come back in some capacity because it's not technically on appeal. So the consideration is, do you allow them to amend an application to include the parking situation is discussed, which puts you out to like July the 18th or whatever that meeting is, which is kind of a long wait. But it's not in front of the board formally right now, and that's actually just what staff was kicking around to try to get to the bottom of what's the best way to do that.
But we could still approve what's in front of us today and then take up the other at another
I believe
time.
that you could, and then just a completely separate application filed by
Allow
the
them the current
appellant.
use of it until we hear.
So this gives them a legit use and occupancy moment, and then we can deal with
And actually,
the material issue later?
Let me turn back to Joey real quick on that, because there's just the question of whether or not any variance on the number of parking spaces would be connected to the surfacing of the lot, therefore not putting us in a position to grant just a variance on the number as opposed to the lot.
They couldn't get their ADA parking count, so they couldn't get their UNO because they wouldn't have legitimate handicap space because it's gravel.
Do you have the power to give them a conditional?
No, I mean, the change of use drives the paving part. If the applicants didn't want to pave, that's something we needed to discuss 6 or 8 weeks ago. You guys are prohibited from granting a variance before you on this application because it's not advertised for a paving variance.
Well, Joey, we still have the parking
Yes,
issue, the
yeah,
spaces.
the
We
issue
could
of the
act
number
on
of
that,
spots.
But they need to repost and do all of that.
Yes.
And of course, we have the right to allow them to continue to use this lot until we hear the next case, right?
Correct. Now, on the UNO side, David Harper's exactly correct. That handicap spot is going to have to be surfaced to even obtain a temporary UNO in this space to get those folks accessibility issues into this building. That's not something that you guys can waive. That's a building code requirement. So
We're more than happy to do that. That was part of the plan originally, and we just forgot to mention that.
Okay. We're trying to help you get around how this works in order to make sure you get what you need to function, right? So, okay. Is that what we need to?
But to summarize from the secretary, we could grant the variance before us today, conditionally allow them not to pave with the exception of the ADA spot until they can come before us with a second request for a second variance with respect to paving.
I wouldn't exactly word it that way, but in function, yes. What'll have to occur is the zoning administrator will have to allow for a temporary occupancy.
Well, we'll let the zoning administrator
until
handle that.
It's not something you guys can do. Bill can certainly do that.
Well, Joey, I would rather the zoning administrator handle that, and we'll just handle what's in front of us right now.
Well, and I asked that question long ago that led to all this conversation because if the tree is the hardship, and we have to assume that it would be built to code, so we would have to assume that it's paved until they ask us not to pave it, then I don't think we can count the tree as a hardship since most of a third or nearly half of the drip line would be paved. So thus,
the entire paving discussion doesn't need to occur at all.
yes, but I'm saying, hypothetically speaking, when we grant a variance, we assume that all codes are followed to get the permit. So if they're saying the hardship is the tree, and yet they're paving under most of the drip line, I would say, well, why can't you add more parking underneath the tree to get more spaces? Hypothetically.
But even if they could add 7 spaces and they'd still be coming to us for a 12 space variance.
But that's a different variance. I mean, it's,
Right.
It's like a setback, I'd like a 2-foot setback. It's not the same as asking for a 30-foot setback, variance. It's a technical issue, but.
It's still really not in front of us, and so I would rather
Sure
us
it is.
deal with that next month.
No, it is in front of us because if the tree is the issue, why aren't we adding, and we can pave that much of the drip line, why can't we add more parking?
We're not talking about paving today. We're talking about the tree. We're talking about parking, so.
Okay, so.
Well, they're also saying lot size orientation.
All right, so let me ask the appellant this. How is the tree prohibiting you from adding more parking?
The reason for the paving is to provide access to those spots that are against the building.
Right, I don't mean pavement. I mean, why isn't the number higher? Why aren't there more parking spaces under the drip line.
From what we understood, we couldn't provide parking spaces under the drip line. Paving was a different issue from what we understood. So therefore, we could bring the parking across and bring those underneath the tree. However, we were only providing to be able to drive under and not park under the tree.
Isn't it actually the purpose is to save the tree?
Right.
So you don't want to park under it for compaction, even if it's not paved. But I see that as a non-issue myself with the amount of paving. The hardship is the tree presently.
Lot and orientation are also tested, yeah. So it's not just the tree. I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, personally, I would say the unstated hardship is that we really, our codes, with all due respect, not up to speed enough to even capture what type of business this is. So we're jamming it into vocational school, which it's not. And the fundamental fact to me is they don't need the parking.
There was a case a few years ago that I feel is kind of similar and on point to kind of how our code doesn't necessarily.
Hey, I'm sorry. Do we have any other questions for them, or should we close the?
We could close.
Okay.
Answer my question.
Okay. We're going to close the public hearing and have discussion.
Yeah, parking and sometimes the zoning code doesn't catch up with these uses. And there was a case that I remember from a few years ago that there was a Buddhist temple in Bellevue, and basically the code classified it as a church. And they said you had to have, let's say, 50 parking spaces, but they don't have your traditional Sunday or Saturday service with all these people, and people kind of come and go 8 or 10 at a time. And they asked us, we don't want 50 parking spaces. We don't need it. Give us 15 or 20. And the code really just lumped them in, even though they're a religious organization, as kind of a church. And so I see this is the best way that we were able to put this in this vocational thing, but I don't see that this whole issue with parking is a big one, because this is a unique entity, and I hope our code will eventually kind of catch up with these kind of things.
Yeah, and my only
Special exception.
concern about the variances of these types is that it makes 100% perfect sense to me in this use, but then, you know, if this tenant leaves and the building sells, then they are only required to have, 21 parking spaces. And so I tend to support it I tend to support it. Well, I mean, if it truly became a vocational school,
Change in use would require they change the parking, right? Mm-hmm. So
right,
you're covered.
But unless Nashville Tech decided they wanted to be there and it's vocational school to vocational school, and you're just saying this. I just tend to like these variances or variances of these type to be tied to either the current owner or the current tenant. Yeah, just as a condition, just so that when things change, if it continues to make sense for the new owner or new tenant, then we can decide that. And if it doesn't, then it just doesn't open the door for it. But I have no issue with this tenant and this use. I think, but that's the only condition I would put on it.
Okay. And I'm satisfied with their answer about the parking versus the drive lane and the use issue. I mean, if you're never having 20 people, I think if anything, our code requires too much parking. We should, on a personal note, I think we should be talking about maximum parking rather than minimum parking. So
I would like to ask the appellant one other question if we reopen it.
Oh, okay. I'm fine with reopening. Everybody else?
You were talking about paving the handicap area. You willing to do that initially? You're pretty much going to have to anyway. Right?
Yeah. Yes, I mean, it seems like either way we go with the parking, that section is going to be paved no matter what, regarding wheelchair access and whatnot. Even from a customer standpoint, that needs to be handled. So I think that they're okay with it.
So you could do that. You could get open, and you could come back later and file another variance request. Come back.
Change material. Okay.
For the other parking thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and we apologize for not doing that. We didn't realize we needed to lump it in there.
So how many people are here for this thing?
There's your 20.
There's our 20.
And then count the urban forester.
Probably. Okay, you gotta close the hearing again.
Yes, close the public hearing. Discussion?
It seemed, well, first of all, I just want to say how exciting it is to see this kind of very creative and innovative opportunity happening in our city. So kudos to you all and great planning for this opportunity. So, but I also think we have, this area of town is really coming back and being revitalized, and I love to see this kind of activity being a part of that for the culture. So as far as I'm concerned, I think that we've kind of come up with a really good solution, and we could make it conditional, that it goes with this business in particular, and if that changes, then we change, then they have to come back before us. So it makes it really nice and clean.
And I would like to echo what Mercedes said as another native Nashvilleian, and seeing the growth and just change of the city, even the last 2 or 3 years, that, you know, this is something that we wouldn't have been able to track 10 years ago. And as being on this board for a while, I don't think I've ever seen kind of a young, creative group of people all for one case here. And, you know, that's the changing face of Nashville, and that's why we're on the radar screen, the New York Times and everyone else. So thanks for bringing this here. This is quite interesting and unique, and as we were talking, maybe it should be known as Houston Street. It's so cool. So, you know, keep up the good work.
We need your website to make sure we all can go take a look at when we can get by and get a membership.
Okay, sounds like we are willing to grant the variance because all of the requirements of MCL 17.40.370 have been met. The board finds the unique characteristics are the majestic elm tree, which truly actually is beautiful, and then the size of the lot, the orientation of the lot. But we condition our approval on the fact that if this business changes, then the condition's no longer met and the variance is no longer in place. Boy,
I'll second.
I'm giving lousy motions today. But anyway, we got a motion, got a second? All right. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes. Congratulations.
Okay, with that, the Board of Zoning Appeals is adjourned. Thank you.